Hello everyone, Lytro Storm here, and today we're back with another What If for Total Drama Island. Episode 4 of Total Drama Island is one of the most iconic episodes of the season, featuring a simple dodgeball game. The Killer Bass lose game after game before they finally attempt to wake up Duncan in order to save them from a third loss in a row. This was the turning point in their losing streak of challenges, as they were finally able to get their first win. But what if the others decided not to wake Duncan up and instead voted him off for not helping them? That's what we'll be exploring today. But before we dive into that fully, I want to just let you guys know that I have launched a channel membership, which you guys can buy for $2.99 a month. It'll give you access to exclusive community tabs, sneak peeks at videos, and also you get to see the videos come out early. So if you have the spare money, I'd really appreciate it, as it helps to support the channel and keeps us afloat. But if you can't do that, you could always like and subscribe if you end up enjoying this video and also sharing it. But anyway, that's enough advertisement. Let's go ahead and get straight into the story. So to start, Duncan was the MVP of the previous challenge, which is what made him tired in the first place after staying up for so long. However, it's very clear based on Courtney's threats to Duncan that he'd be the biggest target on the team if they lost. He refused to participate even when it meant their team could continue their losing streak, and he was just plain rude half the time leading up to this. So the Killer Bass make one last stand in the final dodgeball match, only to be decimated yet again, giving the Screaming Gophers the win in this timeline. Due to the reasons I stated prior, Courtney, the former biggest annoyance on the team, actually starts to seem reasonable when she takes charge on the decision of who they vote off: Duncan. With his help, it's possible that they could have won, and even though he was tired, Gwen stayed awake longer than him, and she was still trying to participate for her own team. She didn't leave them for dead. I'm sure there'd be some defense of Duncan from the guys, but overall, he'd be the one going home, as even if they did vote against Courtney, everybody else has rallied against him. As for the Screaming Gophers, Noah is still in the game since they won, but almost no one likes him since he was not a team player. Now, luckily for the Bass, this third loss doesn't really matter at all for the next episode, since they win in canon without any help from Duncan. In fact, Courtney even implies Duncan wouldn't be any help in the talent show. So the only factor that could change the outcome here is Noah on the Gophers team, but I can't imagine anyone picking him after being such a nuisance last episode, even if he wanted to compete. Plus, the decision was rigged since Heather's alliance was deciding who got in. So Heather is a must, Trent has an actual talent, and Justin, yeah, Noah isn't beating Justin. But he might just beat him on who leaves first, because I'd assume Heather would want to use the negative traction built on Noah at the time in order to get the target off of her back. She convinced Owen, Beth, and Lindsay to vote off Justin canonically, and they're three of his biggest supporters, so I'm sure she'd have a much easier time getting people rallied against Noah. And so Noah is voted off the island, but Justin gets to stay. In the sucky outdoors, Duncan once again has nothing to do with the result of the challenge. Sadie and Katie would still get lost in the woods, leading to the Bass losing once more just after breaking their streak. As for Justin on the Gophers team, I can't imagine him doing much when they're just in the woods trying to survive. Maybe when the bears shows up, all the girls would cling to him for safety, but other than some comedic moments like that, I don't see anything interesting happening here. So Katie is voted off like the original story, putting the Bass down to 7 players. After that challenge, all the contestants gather and end up sharing their biggest fears. Now Duncan did prod Courtney a little bit, which likely made her fear easier to find out for Chris, and he asked Trent to reveal his fear after Trent made fun of him. But I'd imagine that Chris would just go with the hunch based on what was shown from Courtney, and someone else would probably ask Trent his fear anyway, like Gwen. Or hypothetically, Justin. Sure, give him some lines too. Oh, and he needs a fear as well. It's probably just looking like a circus freak, which he hinted toward in Total Drama Action. For the challenge, once again, the Bass just suck. Even with Duncan scoring them a point in canon, they still lost, so I don't see them winning here without him. The only chance they'd have is if Courtney saw that her team had lost 4 times so far and didn't want to make it a 5th, so she finally took one for the team and jumped into the green jelly. But I think she had enough incentive in canon, like Duncan and Bridget's support and the triple points Chris was offering, and she still didn't do it. Now Duncan isn't here to cheer her on, her team is probably less motivated, and Duncan can't even score a point for the Bass, so even triple points wouldn't help them win. So unless Chris is offering quadruple points this time, it's just not happening. And finally, even if you think all of these hypothetical scenarios would still take place all at once in order to get Courtney motivated enough, as I said before, the likelihood of Chris knowing her fear in the first place is lower without Duncan. And I think assuming that he knows her fear, offers quadruple points, Courtney is more incentivized now somehow, like all of these hypothetical scenarios combining at once just is so unlikely. So I think we can just say that the Bass lose again. Also, Justin might be able to overcome his fear, but given his huge reaction to looking ugly in Total Drama action, I'm gonna assume he doesn't, which might be the first time his team starts to see him as not all he presented himself as. But now we have to eliminate yet another Bass player, which has two main options: Tyler, the original elimination, or Courtney, who has been quite annoying to a lot of her team. She yelled at DJ to face his fear, only to refuse to face her own, which you can tell the guys didn't like in that scene. Plus, I think that Duncan was a big reason Courtney stuck around, since DJ and Jeff knew he had a thing for her, so they wouldn't want to vote her off. So I'd see Tyler, Harold, and Jeff voting for Courtney while all the girls vote off Tyler. This puts the vote at 3-3, with DJ's vote being the deciding one. The reason why DJ is the main one I'm hesitant on is since he wasn't in the scene where the guys showed their disapproval at Courtney, as he was the one she was yelling at. But her doing that actually helped him face his fear and get the point, so I could see him being a bit empathetic and not wanting to vote her off just because she choked at the end. And if we're being honest, I could still imagine Jeff or Harold voting for Tyler, it's just a little bit less likely. So with all of those factors, we can say that at least one of them might vote for Tyler, leading to him being the one voted off. Up the Creek really just remains the same, as Duncan just doesn't have much to do in this episode. He did use a lighter on the Bass's campfire to give them a head start, but it didn't really make much of a difference as Harold still threw all their oars into the fire. And without that lighter tactic from Duncan, I'd imagine they'd be even more desperate, causing Harold to still do that, maybe even sooner. But the Bass do clutch to victory after Izzy gives them the winning play by having DJ push the canoes. But I mean, it's the victory that kind of matters the least, as Izzy still gets hunted down by the RCMP anyway, so even if they lost, Izzy would still be the one going home. Paintball Deer Hunter has Justin as a deer and no Duncan involved at all. I figured since Duncan isn't here and Justin is, maybe we just have Justin running into Courtney like Duncan did canonically. This leads to Courtney swooning over him and having a brief interaction with him, though I doubt it amount to much. The Gophers end up losing here, and Cody gets voted off after getting mauled by a bear. After this, we get the cooking challenge. Since the Gophers have an extra team member, their food might end up a little bit better, as they'd have an easier time correcting mistakes. However, the Gophers were an absolute train wreck this episode, and I don't see Justin's level of intellect really doing much for them. On the Bass side, Courtney might have a harder time with the dessert all on her own, but I doubt Duncan really helped all that much. When you look at what the two are doing, it's usually Duncan messing with Harold or distracting Courtney, so it's not like he was the deciding factor or anything. It's also good to note that the Harold bullying wouldn't be as severe without Duncan to rally the guys against him. I'm sure Jeff and DJ would still mess with Harold, but just not to the same extent, which then also leads to them focusing more on the challenge, so the Bass are even more likely to win. This leads to the Gophers voting off Beth after their loss. The next challenge sees our cast going through 5 trust tests for the win. Now we have to replace Duncan in the first challenge, but Bridget, Jeff, and DJ already compete twice in this episode, so that leaves Harold, Sadie, and Courtney. I feel like giving Sadie more screen time is necessary here since she just doesn't do anything after Phobia Factor, and this is her last episode canonically, so I'm choosing her. However, I doubt she's smart enough to do a good job holding DJ up, and when Chris fires the hot sauce gun, she's absolutely done for. This gives the Gophers an even easier first point. After the next two, the Gophers are up 2-1, and this leads us to the blind trapeze, where I think we'd have Justin competing as he hadn't gone yet, and both Heather and Lindsay have already competed. Here, I think Chris would find it funny if the hot guy was the one in danger of getting hurt and potentially disfigured. Plus, him doing the trapeze adds more to his circus freak fear. But with Lindsay as his guide, Justin just isn't gonna make it through unscathed. This leaves the score tied, making the blind toboggan the deciding factor. Now, this is where Duncan not being here does lead to a problem for the Bass team, as DJ only got motivated to win the race after Duncan brought a new bunny for him. However, this made DJ take off his blindfold, so even though he crossed first, he was disqualified because of that. Here, the issue is that Duncan wouldn't bring DJ a new bunny in the first place, so he still likely wouldn't be motivated to win, meaning the Gophers likely win anyway. And so Sadie shares the same fate as in canon, except now she's even bigger of a flop since she had multiple challenges to compete in. The next episode would see major changes in terms of Courtney and Harold. We'd never see Courtney giving into her less uptight urges without Duncan there to push her, and despite the Bass losing, Harold wouldn't be pushed nearly as far to rig the votes without Duncan there to push him. So that means he'd likely just get voted off as the least liked person on the Bass team. However, since the Gophers aren't present at this elimination ceremony, Harold doesn't get the chance to reveal his love to Lashana. Oh yeah, and Justin would probably do okay in this series of challenges based on his ranking in Total Drama Action's $1 Million Babies. For the final team challenge, not much would change in this episode until the final trial. We don't have Duncan or Harold to drive or ski, so we'd need Bridget and Courtney to do it since they're the only 2 members of the Bass team left. I'd imagine Courtney would drive while Bridget skis, since Bridget can surf and they'd likely think her skills would be better suited for that. I don't think Heather's distraction would affect Bridge as much as Harold, not to mention she'd likely actually be skiing as opposed to Harold who just got dragged around. However, Bridget is shown to be the clumsy one, especially in season 1, so I'd imagine she'd miss a flag or just get hit by the rock that hit Harold anyway. This puts the Bass in the loser seat for the final time before the teams merge, forced to vote off one of their remaining 4. At this point, Jeff likes Bridget and DJ is Jeff's guy, so the only option really is for Courtney to get eliminated. And now we move on to the guys versus girls episode. The only change is that we've got Justin instead of Duncan. This leads me to believe that the guys just wouldn't do as well, as Justin would likely refuse to be eating the grosser foods. So I'm gonna say the girls probably take the win here. Episode 15 has Eva and Izzy come back, only for Eva to get voted off immediately. Episode 16 has Heather win immunity, and everyone votes off Trent. Episode 17 gives us our first real Duncan change in a while, with the guys alliance never being formed. Without that, the girls and guys don't have a united vote against anyone. The people with immunity were Heather and Lashana, and I can't imagine Justin with the greatest hiding spot, so this gives us a tough decision on who would be out here. But I'll say that Heather does a combination of an older and later strategy, where she gets people to vote off Justin due to the possibility of a popular vote deciding the winner. Since there's not a united vote, as I said earlier, it'd be easier to strike with herself, Lindsay, Owen, and Izzy. Episode 18 just sees Bridget replacing Duncan and Jeff not being sad about Bridget being gone, but maybe distracted by Bridget being there, like we saw in action. Either way, Lindsay still gets the same elimination as in canon. Hookline and Screamer wouldn't have Duncan to antagonize DJ or face off against the killer, but instead, Bridget would likely just end up getting caught making out with Jeff or lasting near the end with Gwen. But it doesn't really matter since DJ is auto-eliminated in this one. No Duncan means that Heather doesn't have anyone to form an alliance with in the next episode, which basically seals her fate as the one getting booted. It's possible the votes line up for her, but I doubt it, given Duncan's vote against Izzy is now replaced with Bridget, who dislikes Heather. I guess their one-off alliance that didn't make sense in canon really did matter. For the Triarm Triathlon, we've got Bridget and Izzy in place of Heather and Duncan. So one of them has to be with Lashana and one with Owen. I think Izzy and Owen being paired works due to the whole you shoved me into a killer conflict from 2 episodes ago. As for Bridget and Lashana, they definitely don't have as much conflict as Duncan and Lashana did, but I could see their personalities clashing a little. Lashana's attitude and Bridget's laid-back nature could provide some conflict, and maybe even Lashana thinking Bridget is getting too distracted by Jeff. But I think it'd be resolved quicker than Duncan and Lashana's problems. The first episode would go to Owen and Izzy still, followed by the next one which goes to Jeff and Gwen. And since Lashana and Duncan were able to win the last one, I'm sure Bridget and Lashana could too. As for Izzy and Owen, they'd be slowly making up over time and bonding again. This tie means that anybody can be voted off, which could result in Izzy being voted off as she was the last target and Heather isn't there to start gunning for Jeff. And since Bridget and Jeff are together, there's more of a chance of a united vote. Lashana has beef with Izzy due to their previous interactions, and she's the obvious next vote for anyone besides herself and Owen. So rest in peace to Izzy here. For the loser vote, I think Lashana and Bridget both have a high chance of getting the boot, Lashana because she was originally, and Bridget because she is likely seen as even nicer than Lashana. However, Bridget did puke all over Katie and caused her to puke on Sadie, so I think she would be seen a little less favorably by them. And that means Lashana is more likely to get the same elimination, so rest in peace to her as well. This puts our final 4 as Owen, Gwen, Bridget, and Jeff. For the first of the 2 episodes with these 4, Bridget and Jeff would probably be too distracted by each other's presence to help Gwen with any sort of plan. But after Gwen either flips out on them or storms off, Bridget really remembers when Lashana told her about being too distracted by Jeff. Her survival could literally be at stake right now and she's just making out. So she stops and advocates for actually trying to do something useful. Jeff finds the huge egg while Bridget finds the treehouse. After Gwen gets her raft working, Bridget and Jeff offer up some food for a ride, and they all make up and sail on. Jeff gets taken away by the giant bird, forcing Gwen and Bridget to try and pull him down, only to be dragged away as well. They reunite with Owen, and end up revealing all their darkest secrets in the treehouse. After that, they get tribal and end up finding Chris and Chef. Mr. Coconut has the saddest elimination ever, and we go on to the actual Final 4 challenge. This puts our cast into pairs, which I'd like to keep guys versus girls as in the original. When you look at the character interactions we've had so far, Jeff and Bridget are dating, so they obviously have enough time together. Gwen and Jeff just became friends a few episodes ago and only strengthened their bond further in the last episode. And we never had a guys alliance or the girls uniting against said alliance, so the girls and guys really haven't had a lot of interaction together. And I think all of those reasons are sufficient enough to keep the guys versus girls theme going. So in this episode, we'd have Bridget and Gwen forced against Owen and Jeff, which would mainly be about Jeff and Bridget being forced apart. This also continues the story arc set up by Lashana in the Tri-Arm Triathlon and adds more depth to their characters. Gwen would be able to push Bridget into pranking and deceiving the guys, very similar to the original episode. On the opposite end, Jeff would feel betrayed by this and would go full force against the girls. But in the end, I think the night they share at the campfire together would be genuine, and in the morning they'd go at it at the finish line fairly. But sadly, Owen gets distracted by the sticky buns and costs them immunity. Now at this point, I think Owen is going home. There's no shot Bridget is voting for Jeff, and Jeff is also Gwen's friend. Sure, Gwen might vote off Jeff for strategy purposes, as going against a couple in the final 3 is quite daunting. However, even if she does, she knows Bridget isn't going to vote with her, so there'd be a tie anyway. And if there was a tie, there'd need to be a tiebreaker, which Jeff has a 50-50 chance of winning, as it could be literally anything. Maybe Chef gets the final pick, in which case he'd likely choose Owen for eating his sticky buns. So with all those possible scenarios, I think Owen is the most likely person to be going home. Now on to the next challenge. This one is tough as there's so many random factors to consider here, like who would take on what role, what Heather's dare would be, etc, etc. But overall, I think Gwen and Jeff are way more likely to do crazy stuff over Bridget. However, Jeff would be defending Bridget with any freebies that he's earning. This puts Gwen on the back foot, but I think she'd be able to pull through and eventually get Bridget or Jeff to fold. Jeff isn't invincible and could falter here like he did in the No Pain No Game challenge, especially when he's trying to keep Bridget safe from elimination as well, which pretty much doubles his challenges. So I'll say Gwen is able to run Jeff out of freebies due to him using them on Bridget, and she gets him into a dare that's too much for him to last. This puts Bridget and Gwen in the finale, which is kind of cool. Jeff and his friends are obviously going to be rooting for Bridget, but I think Duncan would be on Gwen's side here. As for what Bridget would spend the money on, it would probably be traveling or school stuff. Bridget has Jeff cheering her on the same way Trent does for Gwen in the canon episode, and the biggest issue here for Gwen is that Heather's trick with the muffin might actually work since she wouldn't be able to give it to Owen. That would be a huge setback for Gwen, especially since she was already behind when facing Owen in canon. Bridget is likely more athletic than Gwen, so her chances of winning aren't super high with that added factor. But it is a total drama finale, so obviously Gwen would have some sort of snapback. I'm just not sure what it would be. But let me know what you guys think it would be in the comments. As for the island special, it's possible that Duncan and Courtney would talk more while at Playa de Losers, but it wouldn't really amount to much. The only reason they interacted in canon was due to the challenges their team had to face. And Courtney now looks down on Duncan for being such a loser who didn't even want to help his team, so she wouldn't want to talk to him. This means they wouldn't be working together in the special, so it's possible the money just gets lost in the alligator that Duncan wrestled for Court. That would make the decision on who's in the next season quite difficult, as everyone got equally close to winning since nobody did. But I think to keep things consistent, we'll just keep the same cast from the canon events. Maybe Duncan wrestles the alligator anyway just to get the million, or Chris just randomly selects it. I don't know. Maybe even the alligator could become the new prize that everyone has to catch. That would be kind of insane. It would just be wacky. But that ends What If Duncan Was Eliminated in DODGEBRAWL, at least for Island. Yeah, this one definitely changes Duncan and Courtney's relationship status, as well as maybe even Bridget and Jeff, with them being easier to separate so they might not get obliterated in action. This could also alter World Tour, so I'll definitely be covering more in another video. Duncan's early elimination really didn't have a huge impact on the Killer Bass, but after the merge it kept Izzy, Jeff, and even Bridget in the game longer. All 3 of them he had a role in eliminating in canon, so that actually makes a lot of sense when you think about it. I'm just surprised that these factors took so long to kick in because Duncan is such an iconic character. So to see his impact kind of be nothing for the first half of the season is really interesting. But that's pretty much all for this video. If you guys want to see me continue, like I said, into action in the later seasons with these effects, let me know in the comments, and also like and subscribe to show your support. And if you want to show your support even further, like I said at the beginning of this video, you can become a channel member for just $2.99 a month. You get access to awesome perks, and you also get your name read out in the end of the video. But as always, tell me if you like this part, tell me what you think will happen next, comment your requests for future videos, and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.